Intel Arc Graphics has finally arrived at enthusiast level grade with the debut of the Arc A770 and A750. Delayed for sure, not without its issues, absolutely. Without making too many excuses for Intel here, we do need to remember that this new third player is taking on incumbents in the graphics space with decades of experience where games have been written exclusively for their hardware. Intel was never going to get it completely right with its first attempt, but there's enough here to suggest promising beginnings, though the scale of the task in catching up with the competition in legacy games is, I suspect, going to be a long-term project that will take years to complete, if it's ever fully sorted at all. So two products to look at then, supplied by Intel and both limited editions, or more accurately reference boards I guess, Founders Editions if you like. Both A750 and A770 are superb looking cards in my opinion. No garish colour schemes, no outlandish cooler designs, no bizarro branding that equates them to military grade weapons or sci-fi technology. They're fundamentally back to basics designs that actually look rather great slotted into your PC. The A750 and A770 are essentially like for like in terms of appearance, but the A770 limited edition here, the 16 gig model, comes with RGB lighting that actually looks rather pleasing as opposed to a pulsating RGB nightmare reminiscent of a cheapo 90s sound system. Both A750 and A770 are built on Intel's Alchemist G10 dies, so it makes sense to normalize the form factor. Beyond RGB lighting, they look very similar indeed. Power is fed in via 8-pin and 6-pin PCIe inputs, while outputs consist of 3 DisplayPort 2.0s and 1 HDMI 2.1. There's little more to comment on with regards to the design of the card. It's highly competent. I like the matte finish. What else is there to say? Specs-wise, you'll find that the two cards are quite similar, not surprising really as they use the same core chip. A770 is the fully enabled Alchemist G10 with the full complement of 32 Xe cores, the option of 8 or 16 gigs of GDDR6 VRAM and 560 GB per second of bandwidth. A750 scales down Xe cores from 32 to 28, which in turn sees a similar reduction in ray tracing units and XMX engines. Those XMX engines are essentially Intel's take on Nvidia's tensor cores. They process machine learning tasks like the new XeSS upscaling. RAM is limited to 8 gigs only on the A750 and bandwidth drops to 512 GB per second. Aside from a small reduction in average clock speeds, they're pretty similar, right? So we're going to be talking about performance here, and we'll also debut the beginnings of our new GPU benchmark suite, which also runs on a new platform. The Core i9-10900K system of the last couple of years gives way to the 12900K, paired with G-Skill's impressive 6000 megatransfer per second Trident Z5 DDR5. It's all running on an ASUS ROG Z690 Hero motherboard, and resizable bar, ReBAR, is enabled. And well, for an Intel Arc card, it needs to be. So here's the thing, our new benchmarking suite is built around new graphics APIs, established engines and forward-looking features. Ray tracing is no longer a second-class citizen, and we aren't going to be ignoring reconstruction techniques either. These are the future of gaming. This is good news for Intel Arc, which works well with all of these things, but it does mean that these titles will not highlight Arc's weaknesses. Let's put this plainly. First of all, if your PC does not support resizable bar, do not buy Arc. It'll be a disaster. ReBAR essentially gives your CPU direct access to all graphics memory, as opposed to the older system that essentially uses a tiny 256 megabyte buffer. Arc's memory controller is built around ReBAR. No ReBAR, no real performance in most scenarios. Secondly, Intel's drivers are good to great for DX12 and Vulkan APIs, but have issues with older APIs, DX11 being highly contentious. So yeah, in an Intel video I saw on Linus Tech Tips, Linus himself showed Shadow the Tomb Raider running under DX11 and DX12, revealing very different frame rates, much lower on the older API. As you can see, I've recreated this test with more detailed metrics. Across the entirety of the bench, DX12 is 15% faster than DX11. No big deal, right? Wrong. Frame times are far more inconsistent with DX11, resulting in obvious stutter. More than that, some areas of the bench show much bigger FPS disparities than other areas. DX12 can run up to 2 times faster than DX11. So, doesn't bode well for DX11 titles, right? I think the variance will adjust significantly according to content. So in a DX11 versus DX12 contest in Remedy's control here, DX12 is 15 to 18% faster, and frame health, consistency in frame times, is not that bad. You'd want DX12 obviously, which is a bit of a problem on this game, which insists in booting on Arc hardware under DX11 only, unless you have a DX12 launch option added to the executable there, as you're seeing here. Failing to do so not only locks you out of the best performance, but also bars you from ray tracing, which, as you'll see, Arc is actually very good at. So DX11 is at best inconsistent with Arc. At worst, it's tantamount to the PC graphics equivalent of a nuclear disaster, as you're seeing here with Assassin's Creed Unity. It's terrible with the A770 and literally a slideshow if you don't have resizable bar active. The RTX 3060 that Intel compares the A770 with offers a 3.2 times performance multiplier in performance here on average, rising to a 9.5 times multiplier if your system does not have ReBAR. Even the extremely unimpressive GTX 1650 is 40% faster. This is essentially all down to the poor driver really. So DX11, ReBAR, pretty much a hellscape for Arc. When we display frame rate metrics, we use a nice high resolution 60 FPS hero video for a nice presentation. But here's a look at how Arc A770 with ReBAR on and off actually looks though. Very, very grim. Now we're about to see that Arc is actually rather great on modern titles and the latest APIs if you have a ReBAR system. But what's clear is that DX11 is still a big problem. From what Intel has told us, they're looking to go back through the library and optimize. Thing is, which games need optimization? When will they be optimized? Will they ever be optimized at all? The thing that bothers me about this is that when it comes to legacy titles, everyone has their favorites and they can be pretty obscure. I like Assassin's Creed Unity because it was essentially the last game in the series that stuck to the original formula, that tried to deliver a next-gen experience for its time. But who's to say whether anyone else agrees with me? Are there enough people out there for Intel to say, yup, let's sort this out? And even if there are, what about the thousands of other games, a bunch of which may be your favourite? It's tricky stuff, and the biggest negative point about Arc. Which is a shame because there are plenty of positives as we move into our new benchmark suite. DX12 or Vulkan-based games are mandatory in this lineup, and we kick off with Cyberpunk 2077 using a developer test benchmark that zooms around Night City. A bit more of a workout than the standard bench sequence accessible via the normal menus. Arc A770 can't quite match RTX 3060. The Nvidia card is about 6% faster at 1080p. Arc A750 essentially offers 95% of the performance of its bigger brother. I was scratching my head about which AMD card to include, and I eventually settled on 6600 XT. Even though it's slightly pricier, it's comfortably ahead in many games, but I really wouldn't want to be considering the base 6600 as it's not really competitive in this field. Looking at 1440p performance, RTX 3060 drops back, and both Arc cards leap ahead. Not just ahead of 3060, but 6600 XT too. Typically, the higher the resolution, the better Arc's performance differentials, as you'll soon discover. Doom Eternal next, a short but sweet sequence here. Arc A770 has a circa 20-point lead over 3060, duking it out with 6600 XT at 1080p and moving ahead at 1440p. Again, higher resolutions mean better competitive performance. Doom Eternal is so fast that RTX 3060 and the Arc cards can deliver a great 4K experience without any smart upscaling technologies involved. And it's here where 6600 XT drops back substantially. Arc just powers ahead with A770 delivering a circa 20% lead over 3060. A750 here, just 3 points off the 3060. Let's move on to Codemasters F122 with the latest iteration of the ever excellent Ego engine, which sees the 6600 XT pull way ahead of its competitors here, and the Arc A770 also lags behind the 3060, which is 10% faster. In this scenario, the A770 is about 7.5% faster of the A750, relatively small amount bearing in mind the price differential. The 3060's lead over A770 drops to just 5% at 1440p, but the 6600 XT is still considerably ahead. So we've got another example here of Arc becoming more competitive at higher resolutions, and so at 4K, Arc A770 catches up with 3060 and the 6600 XT's lead drops to just 3%. It was a 23% lead at 1080p, so yeah, interesting stuff. Frame rates are in the 50s here at 4K on absolute max settings, so it's not as if these cards can't deliver this game at a good performance level at 4K native. Forza Horizon 5 extreme settings, another strong showing here from all of these cards. RTX 3060 slots in between Arc A750 and A770. On aggregate, the 3060 is 7 points clear of A750, while the A770 is, well, 7 points clear of 3060. Radeon 6600 XT is notionally the most expensive card here, but delivers really good performance, especially at 1080p and 1440p. Again, Arc moves up the pecking order at 1440p, almost hitting 6600 XT perf levels, beating 3060 by 11%, and where this time the A750 is snapping at the heels of the 3060. A very quick look at Gears 5 here. Again, Arc's relative competitive performance gets better at higher resolutions, but 3060 is still comfortably ahead at 1440p, and 6600 XT, remember, notionally the most expensive card in the lineup here, well, that still retains its lead. We've got a few more titles to look at before we move on to ray tracing performance, where Arc proves to be more surprising. But first up, the rasterized version of Hitman 3. The Dubai benchmark here shows A750 and A770 capable of beating RTX 3060, a 4% and 10% lead respectively. A770 nips at the heels of the 6600 XT here, so perhaps unsurprisingly, when we move to 1440p, RTX 3060 is left for dust. A750 now matches 6600 XT, and A770 is 4 points ahead. I'm sure you can't fail to have noticed at this point that the A750 is a good performer here, right? Yes, it's cut back in spec terms, but it holds its own with actual frame rates not far off its larger sibling. Arc continues to show its potential in Red Dead Redemption 2, the benchmark here throwing up some remarkable results. Arc A770 doesn't just trounce the RTX 3060, it's actually 10% faster than the RTX 3060 Ti. Both Arc A750 and A770 leave the competition way behind here, even at 1080p. At 1440p, the 3060 Ti inches ahead of the A770, but it's still in the running. A really nice result for Arc here. Finally, an anticlimactic result with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where we return to something approaching normality at 1080p, with the A770 closely matching RTX 3060, the 6600 XT inching ahead. However, that scalability, the Arc chips, rising nicely with an increase in resolution. Happens again with Arc A770 at 1440p, 5 points clear of the 6600 XT, while the A750 is on par with RTX 3060. That scalability actually continues at 4K, where the 3060 continues to match the A750, but now the A770 commands a 24% lead over the 6600 XT. Interesting results overall then. I'd say that Arc is holding its own in modern games with modern engines. That said, the configuration of the chip in terms of transistor count and frequency would suggest that it should be competing more often with the 3060 Ti and maybe even 3070, but still not bad for the price, I'd say. The scaling of the chip's performance with resolution also intrigues me. I'm thinking that maybe the driver is still holding it back to a certain degree at lower resolutions. With each leap in resolution, the balance between driver performance and silicon performance shifts more towards the hardware, seemingly delivering better results against the competition. Let's move on to ray tracing, where Intel is promising better than Nvidia class performance. at least based on the chat Alex and I had with Tom Peterson a few weeks back. And you know what? He may well have a point. No holds barred with the first test here, Cyberpunk 2077 Ultra RT. Not quite Psycho RT, but still a very tough workout. Ray tracing really does need serious work on the AMD side, hopefully with much improved performance in the upcoming RDNA 3 cards. Here, the mid-range RDNA 2 offering is well off the pace set by the competition. Frame rates are low, yes, but at 1080p, RTX 3060 is ahead of the Arc offerings. However, Arc A750 here isn't just beating RX 6600 XT. According to our stats, it's within margin of error of RX 6700 XT performance. Moving on to 1440p, Arc A770 moves ahead of the 3060. 6600 XT is now in slideshow territory. It's worth pointing out, of course, that Nvidia has DLSS to fall back on, and we're still waiting for FSR 2.0 and XeSS to be implemented on this one. But, you know, a promising start for Arc then. So let's up the ante with Alex Battaglia's Corridor of Doom, as found in Remedy's Control, notorious for its sheer brutality on hardware, particularly on AMD RT hardware. Intel actually puts in an excellent showing here at 1080p. A750, 15% ahead of the 3060 and 42 points ahead of 6600 XT. A770, an impressive 50-point lead over 6600 XT and a 21% advantage over RTX 3060. Arc A770 kind of sits between 3060 and 3060 Ti RT performance in this one. At 1440p, the performance differentials between Arc and 3060 are pretty much the same, but AMD falls even further behind. Arc A750 is now 15 points ahead of the 6700 XT, not plotted here. It's 55% ahead of 6600 XT, which is shown here. Returning to the rain-soaked Singapore circuit in F122, this time Nvidia takes point at 1080p with both A770 and A750 trailing by 15% and 11% respectively, and the 6600 XT puts in a stronger showing here. It's just 6 points off the A750. You know the script by now though, right? At 1440p, A770 is nipping on the heels of RTX 3060, and in fact, although not plotted here, the 6700 XT too. We're going to end with a couple of titles that demonstrate that Intel's commitment to ray tracing is certainly impressive, and it's up there with the Nvidia competition, if not able to exceed it. Hitman 3, a return to the Dubai stage. The cheaper A750 matches RTX 3060 performance very closely on average. It's about 3 points off the pace. But what I find interesting is how 3060 can beat A750 and vice versa depending on the scene being rendered. However, in all scenarios, A770 is the fastest card of the lot. Remarkably, A770 is 25% faster than A750. It's 23% faster than 3060. It's 94 points ahead of RX 6600 XT. It gets better at 1440p too, where the A770 is even more dominant and the A750 inches ahead of RTX 3060. Finally, Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition. It's the first AAA game release that demands a card that supports hardware accelerated ray tracing. It was built from the ground up not just to work with ray tracing, but to run well on the consoles, which are using RDNA 2 graphics, remember. So we do get good performance on AMD, but we get even better performance on Nvidia Ampere, and well, better still RT frame rates from Arc. Even at 1080p, Arc A770 trounces the 3060 to the point where it's as fast as the 3060 Ti. A750 is 25% faster than 3060 and 53 points ahead of the RX 6600 XT. Meanwhile, A770 increases that lead over the 3060 to 34%. It is 64% faster than 6600 XT and actually beats the 6700 XT by 25%. Remarkable stuff. A sneak peek at 1440p performance here, where the frame rates may be lower, but the performance differentials are even wider. So here, A770 beats 3060 by 45%, and it's almost 73% ahead of the 6600 XT. Not much to say here except that, well, I'm impressed. The core RT performance is there, but what Arc doesn't have at the moment is the same kind of acceleration provided by DLSS on the Nvidia side, which actually turns out to be supported in all of the ray tracing titles in our benchmark suite. What we need is more support for XeSS, which will hopefully be coming in due course and has proven to be an excellent quality upscaler. Time was limited with Arc. We only had around 5 days to produce this review, so we couldn't test XeSS to anything like the degree we wanted to. But in gameplay terms, Arc A770 could easily run Shadow of the Tomb Raider locked at 4K in XeSS performance mode. RT proved a little too much for it though, with frame rates dropping into the 50s. Still though, this is a 1080p 1440p class card, and XeSS could put supported titles into 4K territory, and that's good. Titles that run well anyway also benefit tremendously, as you might imagine. Death Stranding, even in its taxing intro scene, 4K 60 locked, no bother. We did run a short benchmark with XeSS performance mode at 4K, with both Arc products up against RTX 3060 with DLSS set to equivalent settings. Interesting stuff here. If you saw Alex's video, you'll know that RT is very heavy on the GPU in this title. Looks like Arc A770 comfortably outscores the 3060 here. Circa 40% faster overall, I reckon, which is pretty impressive. Once again, Arc A750 trades blows with the 3060. Sometimes it is faster, sometimes it is slower, but as an average across the bench, frame rate's about 10 percentage points to the better overall. So I guess if Arc's RT hardware is good, it stands to reason that XeSS acceleration builds on that, and this bodes well for the future, I'd say. So let's wrap everything up then. Arc is a game of two halves. I'm impressed with the pricing. I'm also rather happy about its performance on modern titles, and I'm really taken aback by the ray tracing turnout too, with 2 of the 3 firms concentrating on strong RT performance. It means that AMD must surely respond. All eyes will be on RDNA 3, where we hope to see great things. Just bear in mind that graphics architectures take years to develop, right? We can't expect miracles, and that goes equally for Arc 2, because as much as I'm loving the performance from our core benchmarks, I just don't know what to make of the support for legacy games. Depends on how important that is to you, I guess. More than that, I'm not really sure how Intel wants to address this issue. We need some kind of roadmap, a title-by-title plan perhaps. DX11 can't be left in the state it is now though, that's for sure. So highs and lows for Arc, but overall I'm coming out of this one fairly optimistic. There's genuine value here, there's strong performance in modern games, but still the sense that there's more to come in terms of driver updates. Out of all of the cards tested today, which one would I buy? That's tricky, but ultimately Nvidia has legacy title support sorted, it has DLSS, it has decent ray tracing. The 3060 isn't a bad buy at MSRP. 6600 XT, excellent raster performance, the legacy game support is obviously there, but ray tracing just isn't competitive. So that leaves Arc, obviously the first step in a long journey for Intel, but it does land some blows against the incumbents and does deliver what Intel said it would. Then there's the huge freebie game pack they're giving away too, including Modern Warfare 2. Helps to make these cards a more compelling package. Oh, and one more thing, there are 2 A770s to choose from, as I said earlier, 8 and 16 gig variants. For the extra $20, the extra RAM is probably worth having. But that's all from me for now, so yeah, like, subscribe, share. There's the bell, of course, for ringing, which allegedly offers instant notifications. DF supporter program, join us. Join our brilliant community, get high quality video downloads, and yeah, maybe full unedited benchmarks from this video to peruse too. And do check out Will Judd's excellent text review for Eurogamer. All of the video capture data used for the benchmarks you've seen in this video, they plug straight into the website, and if you like bar charts, that's where you'll see that data presented in that form. But that's it from me for now. Thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.